Hello. So my friend Chow pinged me, and he says that he's been vibe coding a meditation app, and you could see it here. This is kind of like the first version that Chow was able to sort of get out there, and it's not a bad app. It kind of does what he wanted, basic meditation and stuff like that. It keeps a timer and just some very basic things, but it's pretty mid. I mean, it looks AI purple, which is like, pretty AI is becoming sort of famous for. And it has nothing special basically. It's a pretty average app. And I think this kind of gets at the heart of the issue with vibe coding and how we can do better than average, right? Because if you think about it, fundamentally these LLMs are basically statistical machines that on average, I mean, I've been working with them pretty extensively over the last 6 months, and I could confidently say that on average they seem to produce pretty average work. And they just, they are the average of the data that they've been trained on, and that's what they're sort of putting out by default. And it's up to you to drive them a little bit better, to drive them to do better than average work. And outside of course, doing the work yourself, going in and modifying the code, which is, with vibe coded apps, we really want to try to avoid that, especially for something like this that's client side. There's really no login or any of that other stuff. We really want to try to drive the AI to do a lot of that work because let's be real, these things produce a lot of code, and going in and trying to clean that up could be quite a bit of effort. And so in about 2.5 hours, I was able to take Chow's initial mid-looking app and turn it into something a little bit better than that, right? And so this is like my version after about 2.5 hours of iterating on it. And I thought this would be a good case study of exactly the steps that I went through to take it from that to this. And this version of the app has a few things going for it that I'll show you real quick. Number one, I mean, it has all of the same modes. So it's got the breathing, meditation, the silent, the body scan, the gratitude. And each mode kind of works a little bit differently. And it's got sound effects. It's got some really nice, it's still a Three.js client-side app. It's got music. It's got these other things, right? Which we didn't get out of that initial version. And, but I had to iterate to get to this, right? But it's got some nice scenic, when you actually go into the meditation.
Welcome.
It's got some nice guided tour of the meditation itself. It's actually quite good.
We'll breathe together.
And so we'll go through all of the things that I had to do. And one more thing, it's actually pretty decent on mobile as well. So this app works on mobile, on desktop. And again, I would say this is, a little better than average, right? Like if you had to put an app together like this, it might take you a couple of days. And we were able to do this in a couple of hours with AI, and so and I would say a couple of days if you understand Three.js, because if you don't, it might take you a lot longer than that. So let's get into the different steps that I had to take the thing from this to this. And the very first step that basically I had to do was to take a look at the PRD that Chow used to produce that initial app. And a PRD, for my friends that don't know, a PRD is just a product requirements document. It is something that the engineers and the product managers used to use, or still do use, to sort of describe what features and how something will be built and what will be in it. And the PRD that Chow had to sort of build this initial version of the app was put together by Claude Code. He put it in plan mode and he had it generate a PRD, but that PRD wasn't that great. So the very first step that Chow and I took together is we decided to use ChatGPT 5 with the thinking on, and we decided to put it into deep research. We said, go out there, look at some examples of Zen meditation apps and what techniques they're using, and what we might be able to do to get us a pretty good above average app. And ChatGPT Deep Research came back with this PRD, which is pretty detailed. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in here, 14 pages worth of detail about things that we want inside of this app. And so this is already like a much better start. So we went with this PRD to Claude Code, and I said, build me this. And so that was step one. Step one was, let's get a better PRD, because part of the thing is when you are, just to touch at why I think this is really important, that when you're building with AI, especially something greenfield, you're starting from scratch. Okay, it has no example, it has no code to go off, it has nothing. It could go in a million different directions. So a good PRD is critical at this point because that's going to narrow it down into sort of something that makes sense. And a really, really good thing to have in the PRD that absolutely increases the success rate is examples. And how are you going to find examples? Deep research is a good way to find examples. Otherwise, you got to go and hunt them down. You probably need to do both, which is what I did. I had deep research and I actually went and found several examples myself. So that's sort of step one with this is let's get a good PRD with some examples named in there. And that produced sort of the initial version of this. But it didn't have the different modes weren't properly done. It was using this low poly style that basically pulled you out of the meditation. I mean, it looked so bad that it pulled you out of the meditation. So the next step after we had this better base, so step 2 of this process was to iterate from this better base. And what I mean by that is I still have some of the early conversations with my iterations. And basically it's me going back to Claude Code, restarting the conversation now, right? So once you have something like this, you have the base product, you're pretty happy with it, but obviously you need to iterate on it to make it better. The best way to do that is restart the conversation with Claude Code, reset your context, and now you have this code base that's there with the functionality. And so that's the context now. You don't need to refeed the PRD. You just need the base product, plus you need to tell Claude Code what else you want. And so here I am saying we've got this pretty good meditation app in Three.js. It works pretty, but it's got this low poly style and the scenes and the fly-throughs suck and all this stuff. And so I'm saying I want something more scenic. And one thing that works really well, again, is examples. AI loves examples because then it knows which track to go on. It knows what you want. Without that, it's very difficult because there's a million ways to build things. And gave it some examples. And I actually created a little example list here of different things. So I came across this gentleman's portfolio website here. It's done in Three.js. It's got this wonderful Zen-like experience of flowing through. Obviously, if you want to get something like this vibe coded, I mean, this is probably a lot of effort. It's going to take maybe days or weeks to build something like this. And there's no chance I was going to get anything this good, but we could at least use it as a sort of reference. And what we got, if I go into one of the meditation modes here, you could see we got something. I mean, it's not nowhere close to as good as what that guy had. But this is still kind of nice, right? Like we're floating around and it's got this airy feel with the particles and whatever, right? And each mode kind of looks a little bit different here, and I'll go into that in a second. But part of the inspiration was that another thing that I saw, which again, when you end up vibe coding something nowhere near as good as the original thing, these are all open source things that are out there, MIT license and all that. So I said, look at this and use this as inspiration as well. And my version of this sort of floating ball is obviously not as nice as this, but it's still pretty good for a breathing meditation app. And so again, I spent about 2.5 hours on it. And in two and a half hours, I would say we got to a pretty good, from here to here, we got to a pretty good, pretty good outcome. So step 2 was iterate from this better base with the better PRD and go mode by mode and find the different examples and the different references and the different open source projects that you think could be helpful to make this a little bit better, to guide the AI. We go mode by mode. You can see the silent mode looks a little bit different than the breathing mode, which has the expansion and the and it's got its own
sit in quiet presence.
Its own look and feel. Each mode has its own look and feel. And so the sort of, once you've got the better PRD, once you've iterated step by step, right? New conversation each time, each mode is getting their own treatment. I would say the very next step is to use more AI. One of the great things about generative AI is that it doesn't just generate code, it generates a lot of other great stuff. And meditation apps, this sort of like ambient to make you in the mood to sit there quietly. Music is a big deal. The sound effects are a big deal. The voice that's guiding you through the meditation is a big deal. All of that stuff is super important. And so in this next step is to find ways to bring some of that other stuff in there, right? So you found inspiration for the look and feel, for the code, but now you need to find ways to bring in other other generative AI outputs to make this even better. And for me, that was the sounds. I went, I'm a big fan of ElevenLabs. I'm not affiliated. They don't pay me anything. I pay them. But it's one of the best sort of audio models in the market right now. But the trick with these guys, ElevenLabs, is that it is you have to know how to prompt it, right? And again, if you are mostly used to using LLMs for coding and stuff like that, you probably don't know how to prompt an audio model, how to do its best work. But this is where you could use something like ChatGPT with thinking on. So I went to ChatGPT with ChatGPT 5 with thinking on, and I said, look, here's the full PRD. This is what I'm building basically. And I want for each one of my modes, I want different sound effects. I want them to be totally different. I want a different guided tour. And so ChatGPT not only gave me different sound effects here, it gave me the prompts that I could use. And I made some small tweaks to these prompts because I know a little bit about ElevenLabs and I've iterated with it, and you have to sort of feel it out yourself as well. But it also gave me out the scripts, right? So what sort of voice I want to use. And so if I go back to the app and we listen for just a quick second, let's listen to the breathing mode, right? Because I think it's actually quite cool. So so the music, again, being done by ElevenLabs, the clicks when I click around, ElevenLabs, again, in a way that isn't distracting, that doesn't pull you out of this Zen-like atmosphere. So if I hit begin journey for this breathing mode, listen to the voice.
Welcome. Let your shoulders drop. Soften your jaw. We'll breathe together. Slowly, gently. Inhale.
So this is all done by AI, right? So if I go back, the script is here, right? For every mode, for the silent mode, for the body scan, and I went to the text to speech, and you could see here that I'm asking the voice I'm using, I'm asking for the script snippet by snippet. Some of it I'm using in a loop, right? And all of that's going to get vibe coded in, right? I'm bringing in those MP3s. I'm simply downloading them from here and bringing them in. But that is going to take this sort of app, which is obviously all about atmosphere and you in the mood to meditate. It's going to take it to the next level. And I think that's really a big deal. And again, all of this pretty quickly, within basically 2.5 hours or so, I just getting the scripts and getting the prompts that you could bring to ElevenLabs. And of course, all of this sort of costs a little bit of money. I have an ElevenLabs subscription. I pay for Claude Code and all of these things. But it's pretty incredible that you're able to get a meditation app, a full-blown meditation app, within 2.5 hours from basically nothing to something like this. And so let's listen to this.
Welcome. We'll spend a few quiet minutes with gratitude. Bring to mind one small thing that helped today.
All of these things are putting you in the mood to
smile,
meditate. They put me in the mood to meditate.
rest.
And of course, Kristen might look at
Notice
this
how it feels.
and say, Louis, this is crap, or all of that. And maybe Chow will look at it and say the same thing. But I think it's a lot better than what we had initially. And all of this in the span of 2.5 hours or so, I think is pretty incredible. And again, just to summarize all of the steps, we took this very basic app that had a very basic PRD, and we went to ChatGPT with research on, and we found some pretty good. We had ChatGPT sort with deep research find some good examples of Zen-like features that an app like this might have. And then we basically went and built that version of it with the Better PRD that had been already deep researched. And from there, we iterated mode by mode to get the features that we wanted. So we had a pretty good base now, and we needed each mode to have its own treatment. And so that obviously is a little bit of work. It's going to be very hard for AI to one-shot something like this. And mode by mode, we iterated through the different exercises, and we had a much better app. And then we found even more inspiration in that process. We found fireballs, and we found other people's work that is open source. And we said, and this thing is going to be, it's going to be imperfect. It's not going to be able to use that inspiration 100% the way it is on the web or the way it is on the, but that part of that's what makes it yours, right? That little bit of imperfection also makes it unique and makes it different, because it's never going to be exactly the same as your inspiration. And you could maybe get it close if you iterate a lot, but in my opinion, it's better that it's unique. And then we went to, in step 3, basically we went to more AIs, right? We went to ChatGPT with thinking on. We asked for prompts for sound, for music, for scripts, and we went to ElevenLabs and we generated those sounds and we created this ambience, this much nicer looking, much nicer to the senses kind of app, just with a few prompts. And that was already like super nice. And then I would say the final step in all of this, right now, we have a pretty good base. Obviously, this app could be made. Imagine this was done in a couple hours. Imagine how much better it could be made if I could iterate on this for a few days. I already have a lot of other ideas I could add to this for Chow, but I'm going to leave it here. I think this is a pretty good starting point. I'm going to hand this off to Chow. I've already put it on GitHub for him, and I'll be sharing it with him. And so hopefully we'll see where Chow takes it. Hopefully he puts it up. But I thought this would be a pretty good example of how you can get slightly better than average work with just a little bit of refinement, just a little bit of iteration. And that's really what this vibe coding stuff is all about, is trying to improve those average outputs to be something unique and something good that you could stand behind. And that's really the work in all of this. Even though AI is doing a lot of the work, you have to use your eyes, and you have to have the taste, and you have to get it to where you're happy with it. Anyway, good luck on your vibe coding journey. Thanks for watching.